Welcome everyone who's joining us in Facebook land. I'd like to welcome you to the fourth trimester West Valley Village. This morning, I'm so delighted to introduce Stephanie Clerget. She is the VP of People and Product Development and responsible for the innovative training programs at Colby Corporation, provided for leaders, their teams, and individuals. Prior to joining Colby Corp, she had her own coaching and consulting practice and held a variety of operational leadership roles during a nearly 15-year career at Intel Corporation. Stephanie holds a degree in industrial engineering from Stanford University, an MBA from Babson College, and a coaching credential from the Hudson Institute of Coaching. When not at work, she enjoys spending time with her husband and 2 children and volunteering at education and STEM-related nonprofits. Stephanie, we are so excited to have you here today to talk about strengths in parenting, because I feel like a lot of us, we struggle to figure out what our strengths are and mostly identify our weaknesses. So I'm really excited to have you talking for us today. I think it's going to teach us a lot. So welcome, and please go ahead and get started.
Well, thank you, Jenny, so much for having me here. I'm just so excited to be here today. I know Jenny read all my embarrassing bio stuff, but really, the most important thing, I think, is I'm just excited to be here. You know, I know somebody had mentioned Jenny was her breastfeeding. I do not know why I'm losing all the words.
Lactation consultant. Yeah,
consultant, yes, lactation consultant. Thank you. And I still remember my lactation consultant. As soon as I heard that's what Jenny does, I was like, oh, do you know mine? Unfortunately, she did. And so I was able to get back in touch. I've also had pelvic therapy. So I was excited to hear the pelvic therapists that are online. And I just feel like we don't have enough opportunity to have these conversations with each other. And so I just love this opportunity to spend a little time with the village today. And really the big credential that I have is that I'm also a mother. I have 2 kids. You can see them here. They're growing like weeds every day. My daughter literally stands up next to me every day and tries to measure herself. And, you know, I honestly don't think I even have a half an inch on her anymore. So she is 14 and my son is 12. So it's, you know, I have good news and bad news for those of you who have smaller kids, which I know there's all kinds of different age ranges that we heard on the line. That was fun to kind of hear. But for those of you who have smaller kids, I have some bad news and some good news. So the bad news is that parenting does not get any easier as the kids get older. But the good news is that parenting does get more rewarding. And that's what's really cool. The stages kind of change with each age. And, you know, it maybe goes from a little bit more of a physical activity to a more of a mental and emotional activity with parenting, but it does definitely get more rewarding over time. And one of the reasons that I'm here, as Jenny mentioned, is I work for a fantastic company called Colby Corp, and our mission is to help individuals understand their instinctive strengths and just use that for whatever they care about most. So most of what I do is in a business setting, but I love doing things like this where it's a little bit more community oriented. So I'm just excited to be here to help you do whatever you care most about, which in this case, I know is about our families and children and community. And I wanted to give you just a teeny bit of a background. Our founder, Kathy Colby, started this company because she was working with children that were considered to be gifted. And she was actually a premier consultant in gifted education. And she created these summer camps for kids, and the kids were smart and motivated, and she just kind of put problems in front of them, different tasks that she asked them to do. And what was interesting about it is, even though they were all kind of labeled gifted and smart, she noticed that when she didn't tell them how to solve these problems, she actually found that they solved them differently, even though they were kind of all equally intelligent. And she started to notice some patterns in the way that these children solve problems. And it turned out that those patterns were true for adults as well. So she started putting some of those things together and really figured out what's the difference between sort of your skill set and personality, and then this other dimension, which is how you solve problems. So that's a little bit about what we're going to talk about today. And I have a really light framework here that I probably won't stick to, because that's not one of the things that I naturally do, which I'll share with you a little bit later. So very light framework. I was really going to talk about, how to identify your strengths and the strengths of your child and other caregivers, and then how to use those strengths in the most effective way possible, and then how to align on how creative problem solving really helps you to manage your energy and work with others toward common goals. And this framework is really about you, as I mentioned, other caregivers, and the strengths of your child. But as I started building the presentation, I started thinking, you know what, really, there's only one really important place to spend time, and that's you. So I know that many of you may not have been on an airplane in a while. It's been a while for me as well with everything that's been going on. But if you recall that time period, one of the things that the flight attendants say is put your mask on first. And so that's really what I wanted to talk about using this lens of strengths is how can we put our mask on first. And really it's understanding your strengths and then learning to leverage them or make the most of them. But then I want to talk about practicing self-care and what does strengths have to do with self-care. And I know that Jenny mentioned that Colby's providing assessments, and we'll talk a little bit about that later, but I wanted to let you know that if you haven't had a chance to take the assessment yet, that really won't affect your ability to, learn something from this presentation today. But I do hope that if you can find some time, I know everybody has busy schedules, but if you can find some time to do that, I really do think it would be of benefit for you. So let's kind of talk about what leveraging your strengths really means. And interestingly, you actually have strengths in 3 parts of the mind. I know that in some of our introductions that we did today, we talked about our strengths, and some of you said it's really hard to think of our parenting strengths. And I'm glad we started off with that exercise. We're going to do a few more as we move through our time together today. But I really want to encourage you to continue to build that muscle of considering and reflecting on what are your parenting strengths, because the more that you can really, take hold of those and feel those in those moments where you feel like you're not doing so well as a parent or you're not feeling as strong, you can kind of recall those strengths and they will help you. But interestingly, you actually have strengths in 3 parts of the mind. So thinking strengths, feeling strengths, and doing strengths. And when you can put all 3 of those together, that kind of creates a sweet spot for you in terms of parenting. So let's kind of take a look at each of these individually. The first is the thinking part of the mind. And this is the part of the mind that's all based on your natural ability to reason and intelligence. It's all the knowledge and skills that you've gained over time. Experiences that you have learned. I appreciate Megan talking about not having kids quite yet, but having nieces and nephews. All of the experience we had both as children ourselves, the way our parents parented us, the way we interact with children in the world, all of those things kind of fall into this part of the mind. And then any habits that we have, any learned behaviors, which again can come from some of the things that we've experienced either as young people or as adults. So really this part of the mind is all about what you do based on your experience and learning. And the good news is some of us have already practiced some of this skill, which is figuring out what are your parenting skills. So I made a relatively short list of strengths, and there are tons more. Earlier, some of you added some fantastic strengths. I love that people said fun, and that I'm a teacher and a learner, and empathy and self-regulation, all kinds of fantastic parenting strengths. I just went through and kind of highlighted a few of my own. So I think I'm very approachable. I don't know if some of you had parents or grandparents where they kind of sat in a chair and sort of said things like children should be seen and not heard. But I think I try to have the opposite approach where my kids can kind of come to me anytime with sort of any problem or issue. I'm knowledgeable about a lot of things. And so I try to impart a lot of knowledge to my kids. I'm resourceful. So when they have issues, I'm really happy to help them go find different ways to approach problems and think about problem solving. And when I didn't put on here, but I was thinking about earlier, is I'm very future oriented. So I'm constantly thinking about what is it that they need, not just for today, but what is it that, I'm responsible for imparting on them to be for the next few months or the next few years, that kind of thing. So I would like for everybody, who hasn't had a chance to think of this, to just kind of think about what are some of your parenting skills and what are some of the things that you've learned about parenting over time. What's interesting about this too is when I was just had my first daughter. My mom was actually, fortunately, was able to come from Georgia to Arizona to come help me. And that was a great experience. But I remember being pregnant and having that book, What to Expect When You're Expecting. But then I had like 12 other parenting books because I naturally, just voraciously like to read about certain subjects that I'm interested in. And she's like, mothers have been having babies for years. What do you need books for? But that was one of the natural ways that I would learn about parenting. So we'll kind of talk about this as we go on, but your skills don't have to be someone else's skills, right? And when we talk a little bit more about other caregivers, sometimes if, some of you mentioned patience earlier, if you're a little less patient, then maybe there's other caregivers who can be a little more patient, or playful is one of the ones. My husband is the fun, playful one. I am not so much. So, instead of thinking of that as a parenting fail, I just look for, other friends, aunts, uncles, my husband, who is going to be the one that's going to be, filling in some of those for those skills that I don't maybe have. The next one is this feeling part of the mind. And so this one we typically just think of as our personality, and there's millions of personality assessments out there. So if you've heard of Myers-Briggs or StrengthsFinder or via character, there's Enneagram, True Colors, like DISC, any of them. There's just a ton of assessments out there that measure our personality, or what motivates us, or the things that we like to do and prefer to do. But there's also this piece about our values and emotions that we're going to talk about in just a minute. But this feeling part of the mind is pretty important. So it's what we do based on the things that we want to do, that we desire to do, and our personality. So this one, we're probably going to spend a little bit of time. If you want to type something in the chat, or even, unmute yourself and answer this question, I would love to hear some responses on this. But the question here is, what aspects of your personality are helpful in parenting? And I'll give you an example for me. So some of the things that are part of my personality, I'm super curious. So I find the world interesting and everything going on in it. And I think that that's something that I can pass on to my children, kind of helping them develop their curiosity of what's going on in the world. I feel like I'm pretty loving. I'm the kind of person who's going to tell you that I love you and that I'm proud of you, and pretty affectionate, that kind of thing. And then also very positive. So my son kind of struggles sometimes with being positive, and seeing, when he struggles with homework, or even with playing video games, it really is incumbent upon me to kind of go and say to him, what's something positive you can say about this? Or what's one step you can do to take forward? Or what is something that you're grateful for as a part of this situation? So that's some examples for me. So if you have any examples, I would love to hear some for you. From any of you who have some thoughts about your personality and what's helpful.
I think I'm joyful a lot.
I love that. I love that. Yeah. There's one of my favorite, and I'll put this in the chat because you'll soon see, I promise. I think this is the last assessment I will suggest to you, but via character.org. So this one is free. I love Via Character. It kind of talks about your character strengths. And so one of mine is zest. And so it's really similar to what Jenny was just saying about being joyful. I just have a zest for life. People are like, how many cups of coffee have you had? And I'm like, none, I'm just high on life. So definitely, and that one is free all the time. So there's no deadline in taking that. And it's an amazing assessment. So if you struggle with doing this, the reason why, I'm a proponent of assessments is because sometimes just kind of trying to sit in your house, or alone by yourself, and think about what areas am I strong in. It can be hard, especially when life is hard, when things are a bit challenging. But assessments kind of give you that little bit of a nudge and a push, and say, here's what you're saying about yourself that maybe is a little bit harder to think of. The other thing about personality is, what might get in your way. And so one of the things that gets in my way, for example, is I'm introverted. And, we'll talk about this at the end as well. But, I've got 2 kids. And for those of you who have multiple kids or even know multiple kids or have siblings, you will know that you can be born in the same family of the same 2 people and somehow turn out to be very different. And so my daughter is very, very extroverted and my son is very introverted. So of course that introversion works well. My son and I can sit in a room and we're just happy to be together, and he's playing video games and I've got a book and we're kind of happy. But my daughter is constant energy and she needs that interaction. So sometimes, I have to go find other outlets for her and make sure that she has that. I actually told her that I had her brother just to keep her entertained, because by the time she was a year and a half, I knew there was no way that I could provide all of the playfulness that she was gonna need. But that didn't work out for quite a while. But fortunately, during the pandemic, they really bonded, which was really great. I'm like, yes, the plan is finally working. I can tend to be a little impatient. So that's something that I kind of want to work on. And I know some of you kind of mentioned that that's either a strength of yours or something that you need to work on. And these things are situational, right? There's some things I'm very patient. I'm much more patient when I'm helping with homework than I am about, when the kids haven't made such good decisions. I'm much more likely to sort of lose my patience, or something that I've told them several times. And, they're now old enough where they should know better. I sometimes lose my patience. And I'm also very driven, which I hope that they're learning a good work ethic from me, but I sometimes worry, am I working too much? Am I putting too much effort into things outside of my family life? So those are just some of the things. But again, they're things to work on, not things that make me a failure as a parent. We're all growing and learning on this journey together. All right, so some other things in this feeling part of the mind, because this one's pretty complicated. What motivates you as a parent is something that's really interesting. And one of the things is that I always say is I want my kids to be happy, healthy, and well-adjusted. And to me, well-adjusted means that they're confident and independent, and that they, whatever way they choose to contribute to the world when, they're old enough to make bigger contributions, I just want them to feel like they have the tools to do that, the self-esteem, the self-efficacy, whatever it is that they have, they feel like they have what they need sort of in the backpack of life to do the things that they need to do. So that's really what motivates me, is kind of thinking about them out in the world without me, and what in these few short years that we have together. Because if you think about it in the span of life, obviously parenting goes forever. My mom actually sent me a text this morning that said, I love you and I'm so proud of you and I hope your presentation goes well. So parenting doesn't end, even though I'm 40 something. But certainly there's a part of time that you have, and so for me, having some sort of goal that I can go back to is really helpful. The next thing is, what are your parenting values? And, I always say to my kids, make good choices, have a good attitude, and do your best. So, I used to send them off to school every day with that thought. And then as they got older, I started quizzing them on it and saying, okay, what are the 3 things that we want to do today? And, even they were, 4 or 5 years old, and they were able to kind of start to articulate that. And so now, as a parent, it's kind of easy for me to say, okay, well, was that a good choice? Or are we having a good attitude? Or did you do your best? Right. And, they hate that. But I think that it's making them, hoping that it's making them better people, but it helps us align when there are times when, things aren't going well, or, they've got struggles in life, really giving them some tools and things to think about. And we'll talk about this a little bit more later too, but this is really helpful to understand with other caregivers, right? If you have other caregivers in your life, are they aligned to your values, the values that you have with your partner or whomever else you might be co-parenting or giving care on a regular basis? It's really, really, really important that you're aligned on values, because, for example, make good choices, that can mean so many different things to so many different people. I have a friend who is vegetarian, and she and her husband said that they were going to raise the children vegetarian, and then they got a divorce, and now he's feeding the kids meat, and that was something that they had decided when they were together they weren't going to do, right? And so now they're trying to figure that out, and what does that mean? But there's all kinds of things that being aligned on values can affect. So now we've covered two parts of the mind, the thinking part of the mind and the feeling part of the mind. But the third part of the mind is really what my specialty is, this doing part of the mind. And as I mentioned, this is what our founder, Kathy Colby, found out by working with children. And then surprise, surprise, it was true for adults as well. And this is really based on your instincts. So some of us have fight or flight instincts. I know there's lots of controversy about whether maternal instincts are a real thing, but certainly there are some instinctual things that are a part of us that aren't just things that we've learned, but we're just kind of born with or are innate to us. Some strengths that we have, and particularly these are ones that are true about how we make decisions and how we solve problems. And that's really what the Colby A index identifies. And I just wanted to give you guys a few quick things because I know some people have had some really bad experiences with assessment. Sometimes people feel labeled or boxed in. And so it's really important to us that people understand that we've been around for over 40 years and Kathy and all of our team has done lots of studies and checking to make sure that the results aren't biased by gender, age, or race. So I know there's some cognitive assessments or intelligence tests that have had some issues with that, but this is actually something that's really, really important to us, that we make sure that it's unbiased. They're also positive. So everything about the assessment is a strength. So we do use numbers, and the numbers are really helpful in order to kind of see where you are and see where you are in terms of working with other people. But all the numbers are positive. So when you take the assessment, you'll see kind of like you see there on the screen, if you can see it. There's a set of numbers that you're given, but whether they're more 2s or 10s or 5s or 1s, it actually doesn't matter. They're all strengths. And we also all have equal strengths. So don't start trying to add them up because it doesn't matter whether they add up to 19 or 22 or whatever it might be. All of us actually have equal strengths. We just might have different strengths from each other, but it's actually that diversity that makes us amazing parents and amazing caregivers. And then the last thing is the good news is these are unchanging. So although it'd be a great business model for us to just say, retake it every year, these instincts actually don't change. So you really only have to take the Colby A index once in a lifetime, which is great. These are results that you were born with and you had ever since you were, a baby or a child running around on a playground. All the way until adulthood and beyond. So there's lots of studies online for those of you who enjoy looking up that kind of data on test, retest reliability and such, but just know that these are results that you can count on. So what is it that we're actually measuring with some of this stuff anyway? We're measuring these instinct-based action modes. And all of us gather and share information in one way or another. That's what the red line, the red bar tells us, is how do we gather and share information? Do we need a lot of detail and specifics? And do we naturally research? And that would be kind of on that specify part of the continuum. Or do we naturally simplify and summarize, and we don't need a lot of detail in order to get started. And there's people who fall all along that continuum, people who don't have a need to justify their actions versus people who do feel that they need justification and information in order to move forward. Then there is follow through, the blue line there, and that one is all about how we organize and design. And if you're like me, you might be actually surprised that we all organize in a certain way, because let me see how many of these I can collect on my desk right now, but I organize in a very non-traditional way. So I organize with all of these sticky notes here. And so I actually thought that I was not an organized person, but turns out that I actually am organized. I just organize in a non-traditional way, in a different way than others would. So when I actually put things in files, it's like they disappear. If I put stuff in a drawer, it's like it disappears. So I need to keep things accessible, and I change up the way I organize. Versus others of you naturally put things into systems. You add structure, you plan, and put things, in a nice orderly way. And again, both are strengths, both ends of the continuum, and everywhere in between are all strengths. But if you know this about yourself, you can stop beating yourself up. You can stop making New Year's resolutions every year to say, I want to be more organized, right? I mean, this background of mine looks fantastic, hopefully, but behind there is my unmade bed. So there's all sorts of different ways of taking action. The next one is quick start, and quick start, that green line, is all about how we deal with risk and uncertainty. And we've had a lot of practice with this one lately, right? With things that are risky or uncertain over the past few years. And some of us naturally lean into that. And we say, you know what, things are uncertain. Let's just start experimenting or brainstorming or innovating. And others of us, really our role as parents and as people is to say, you know what can we keep the same? What can we keep stable while the rest of the world is kind of falling into chaos? And neither one is better than the other. They both are positive. And then last but not least is implementer. And this one is all about how we handle the physical space and tangible things around us. So how do we use implements or tools or deal with the physical world? And that really falls into our problem solving and decision making, because some people need to be hands-on. And they need to see it to believe it. They're going to maybe build or create something in their problem solving approach. And others on that other end of the continuum naturally envision or imagine. And we don't need to see it to believe it. And we deal with things that are maybe more conceptual in nature than are hands-on. Or three-dimensional or in the real world. So those are the four modes that we are kind of looking at, or the four kind of categories of problem solving. And as I mentioned, you guys can take the Kolbe A index. I think that this offer will be available for another 10 days, so till March 12th, if you're interested in understanding your problem solving approach. And of course, we're applying it to parenting today, and I'll show you some examples of myself, but this is true for all aspects of life. So it helps you understand yourself in your career, in your work, your interactions with others in your life, both personally and professionally. So there's all kinds of good stuff that comes from knowing your strengths in all three parts of the mind, but in particular, this part of the mind. So just a reminder here, this is your natural pattern of behavior when free to be yourself. So not when others are telling you how to solve problems, how to take action, how to make decisions, but when you are free to do it yourself. And sometimes the world comes and tells us all this stuff and overshadows our natural strengths. So it's really important to really think about what is it that we would do when we are free to make our own choices. Another quick reminder, you're capable of taking action in any of the 12 ways. So each of those four instinct modes that I showed you actually fall into 3 other categories, which I'm not going to go into, and it ends up being 12 strengths altogether. And you're capable of any of these 12. So for example, even though I naturally specify, I naturally research and dig in depth and get into the details, I can simplify. I was able to come up with a, relatively short title for this presentation, for example. So you can do it, but that's just not naturally the way that I take action. And it's the same for you. You have 4 ways that are natural to you. So I'd love to give you just kind of a quick example, and I'm going to use myself. So these are my strengths. So the 4 numbers there, 8, 3, 6, 3, and again, all of them are strengths. Could also use those strengths words to describe it. And this is that same chart I just showed you, and I've kind of circled my strengths so I could give you an example of how this might be helpful in parenting. So the first one for me is specify. So again, in that fact finder, gathering and sharing information, I need this detailed information to make decisions. And even though I gave you the example earlier of a book and having all the parenting books, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're spending your day in a book or you're spending your day online doing research. It could also be that you're interviewing people. And this is where the 3 parts of the mind come together. If you're more extroverted and you naturally specify, then you're going to probably do research by talking to people versus, getting research in a more traditional book learning type of way. My next one is to adapt. So in this place about how do you naturally organize, I naturally don't need a lot of structure. I don't necessarily need to follow a plan. So as a parent, this can mean that my children don't have strict routines. So I got a lot of advice as a parent early on that, you've got to have the routine and follow the method and have sleep schedules and all of that. And again, I was able to do some of that and I tried some of it, but I knew that long term, it wasn't really going to work well for me. And it turned out that my kids were able to learn to sleep through the night without having very strict routines and sleep schedules. As they're getting older, though, I'm starting to look at what are their natural patterns of problem solving, what are their natural patterns of behavior, and trying to see, because just because I have this natural strength to adapt and kind of drive flexibility, it looks like my son is a little bit more of someone who naturally maintains. So if you give him a plan, he's going to stick to that plan. He's not going to naturally create a lot of systems and organize for himself. But for example, I went and put some shelves in his room and then started sorting his toys, and now he keeps that and maintains that. So, figuring out what are your strengths, what are your children's strengths, what are their caregiver strengths, can really be helpful. And even if your kids are too young to take the assessment, which there are youth-based assessments for this as well, not the Kolbe A, that's really for people who are at least have had a job, so 16, 17, 18 and older, but we do have some youth-based assessments as well. But you can just kind of start paying attention to some patterns that you see with your kids and seeing what happens when the plan changes, right? Because for me, the plan's the plan till the plan changes. The plan changes, no big deal, but you can see if your children might be a little bit different from that. The next one is quick start. So again, this is how we deal with risk and uncertainty, and I naturally facilitate change. So I don't drive change for change's sake. That's my husband. He falls into that innovate category. So he'll just wake up on a Saturday morning and say, let's do this. Or the other day he said, I think we should sell the car. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And so, but that's great because I think my daughter leans a little bit more towards that innovate side of the continuum as well. But for me, I can kind of hang with some of the change, but it's a little bit different. But it's great because I can help my children deal with change, either showing them that what's going to stay the same. So kind of because I'm in that middle, I kind of say, okay, here's what's going to stay the same. Here's how we can kind of mitigate the risk. But I can also say, maybe it's worth just thinking of this as an experiment and maybe just trying something, right? So I naturally facilitate change for them, which can be helpful as parents. And then that last one, again, how we manage space and tangibles. And I naturally envision. So I don't need to see it to believe it, but also I don't need to spend my time repairing things or putting together furniture or doing school projects that require extensive materials or that kind of a thing. So I just know that about myself. So if there's some thing that requires a lot of use of tools and materials and that kind of thing, I'm going to go find someone who is going to be a little bit more helpful in that situation. Like, for example, it's my husband. He naturally falls into that restore category. He's the one that's going to fix my daughter's flat tires on her bike and teach her how to fix those flat tires, right? So you can kind of think of some examples of what that might look like in your parenting life. So that's a little bit about the Kolbe assessment. And for those of you, I know it looked like there were several of you who took it prior to our time together today. But if you're interested in more information after you take the assessment, there's also the other link that's on the screen. So kolbe.com/Kolbe Essentials. That kind of gives you a listing of all 12 of the strengths, because the report that you get when you take it is focused on just your strengths, but sometimes it can be helpful to have information about all 12 strengths so that you can kind of see other caregivers or other people in your life. So we've put all three parts of the mind together now, the thinking, feeling, and the doing. And you might be saying to yourself, Stephanie, this is fine, but why do all three parts of the mind come together? Why do you call this our sweet spot? And for those of you who are in a position, I know some of you might be taking a walk or have a baby in your arms or what have you, but for those of you who want to participate in this exercise, I did have a little quick exercise to kind of show you why it's important to kind of stay in your strength zone. So if you have a piece of paper around, any scrap piece of paper will do. You can even do it on the back of a receipt. Any writing utensil will also work. So I'll give you guys just a minute to grab something if you're in a position to grab something. But like I said, this size of a Post-it note, pen, pencil, even a highlighter might work. And what I'm going to have you do is print your first and last name. So just find a piece or a scrap on that paper and just print your first and last name. It looks like most of the people on the screen have reasonably sized first and last names. a long first name, but my last name's pretty short. All right, fantastic. Okay, so then what I would like for you to do is hopefully somewhere close to that, take whatever writing utensil you have and switch hands and do it again. Right, your first and last name again. All right, so Jenny, I can see you did it. I think Barbara, you did it as well. So you guys, so Jenny's actually showing hers, but do you guys, how is that different between the first time and the second time? You can feel free to chat in if you'd like as well.
I don't even know how to hold the pen.
I had the same, I was like, okay, let's see. Yeah, and it doesn't look anything like the first. Very funny.
And in the chat, the second time was hard, much easier the first time. Yeah. So yes, the first time, right, it was probably easy. It felt natural, and it didn't take a lot of time. The first time you guys were like, do, and Jenny's like, here it is. That second time, right, it took longer. It did not feel natural. And then look at your results. Your results aren't as good. And so this is really just kind of a quick little exercise to demonstrate what it's like to be working with your strengths as a parent versus working outside of your strengths as a parent. And that's not to say that you shouldn't ever challenge yourself to get out of your strength zone or your comfort zone, because sometimes we do have to do that. But the more you can stay in your strength zone, the more it's going to be natural, and it's going to take less energy and give you better results. And obviously the thing you want to do, if, as I mentioned, if you don't have strengths in a certain area and you feel like you need to partner with someone else versus continuing to stress yourself out to be someone who you're not. So how do you stay in your strength zone? Well, one of the most important things to do is to start with self-care, because you cannot focus on your natural strengths if you're so tired and so overwhelmed that you can't think straight, you can't control your emotions, and you can't act in a way that's instinctive to you, because you literally cannot focus on what your strengths actually are. So we have to start with the self-care. And what I want you to do, you don't need to unmute yourself if you don't want to, but what I want you to do silently in your house, you can whisper it to your baby or your cat, but repeat after me. Self-care is not selfish, okay? Self-care is not selfish. Remember, you have to put your own mask on first. In that awful example of being on the flight, right? You're struggling to get the mask on the baby and you don't have your own. You don't have enough oxygen to do it right for the child that you are trying to assist. It's that same principle. You have to take care of yourself in order to do what you need to do for others. And so we start with self-care. How do you do that? The first thing is give yourself a break. And the second is lean on your village. And guess what? Y'all actually have a group called a village. It's not just this abstract concept of it takes a village to raise a child. You guys actually have a thing that's called a village. That is amazing. So let's first talk about giving yourself a break. So any small thing will work. And I remember when I had my daughter, and then when I had, my kids were two and a half years apart. So not too close together, but close enough where there's still, one that is causing lots of trouble while the other one I'm holding in my hand and crying, right? So any small thing will do physically, but if you can do something physically, taking a physical break, that will help. So whether it's a nap or a shower, or a quick outing. So even just a walk. I noticed somebody this morning, we were doing introductions, was taking a walk. That is fantastic. If you need to just take a minute and go sit in your car for a second. I know as my kids got older, before, as I was transitioning from work back to home, I would sit in my car for a second and really just try to center myself, because I knew the second I opened the door, I would have the kids run up to me and hug me or ask for something or what have you. And although it felt great to be needed, I just got off of this big stressful job, and then I really needed just a moment to myself to decompress before going inside. Exercise, we kind of were joking this morning a little bit about yoga. So anything that you can do, even it's, it reminds me of the old sit and be fit. So anything that you can do, even if you're just doing stretches while you're sitting in a chair, wiggle your toes, just getting that physical sense of things going can really be helpful. The other thing is use your senses. So sometimes you literally just can't take a walk, or you can't do anything big. You can't even fathom how you would manage to take a nap or even a shower, but you can use your senses. And so music, so, I have a couple different playlists, right? The playlist that I need to feel good, and it's got the happy songs. And sometimes I just want to feel sad and cry. And so I've got the sad song playlist and everything in between, right? And so music, humor, right? Maybe you just need someone to make you laugh. You can, bring up a stand-up comedian on YouTube or Netflix or whatever, get some humor in your life. Aromas, I could talk about this one for days, everything from essential oils or just lotions. Like I keep a little lotion right here in my desk, and it's just something that makes me happy. It's frosted berry lotion, and I used to freak out because there were different ones for different seasons, and I needed to switch out the ones for the different seasons. And I'm like, that's stupid. I'm just going to use the one that's right here, right? So try not to make this thing something that's going to be stressful for you. If it's stressful for you to have a candle burning because you're worried about it, then don't get a candle, get something that plugs in, right? So try not to stress yourself out with your self-care routine either. Light is an interesting thing as well. I never really thought much about light until I did a float spa experience, and they had the different lights that change. And so now I'm kind of fascinated with having, different light, or most importantly, get a little bit of sunshine. Even if you can't or aren't willing to leave the house, open a window and sit next to a window for a while versus staying in a room that doesn't have any natural light. So any of those things that kind of get your five senses going is something you want to think about. And then also what energizes you. So really think about what are the things that energizes you. So maybe light or aromas don't matter to you at all, but music is something that really does energize you, right? So think about those types of things as well. And I actually, by the way, made myself a little energizers list, because sometimes I forget what energizes me, because it takes me a while sometimes before I get back to some of my self-care routines. And so I actually keep a list that I refer to. The other thing is mental, right? So, the first question is, are you using your strengths, right? So if you're an extrovert, are you talking to other people? And I know sometimes it can be hard, especially, there's still some pandemic stuff going on. But I actually had a app on my phone. It's called Boxer. I'll put it into the chat in case anybody cares. But it actually allowed me to leave messages for friends. And so if I'm up at, for me, it was driving to work. Nobody else was available during the time I was driving to work, but some people, you might be up at 3 a.m. for your 3 a.m. feeding or what have you, and you can leave a message for someone and they can leave you messages back. And I literally had, a relationship, someone that I almost never got a chance to see, but I would take whatever time I had, put on my headphones, I could walk around and do other things and leave messages. And then it was something to look forward to because I would get the other person's message. So different from having the time to talk to someone at the same time, but at least you are getting some of that information. And actually, I found the asynchronous communication quite nice because there was no one to interrupt me. So if I needed to go on a rant, I could just have the full rant, and I didn't hear the response until the next day. And sometimes I felt better before I even got the response. So thinking about that. Of course, there's reflection and journaling, listing. So just making lists. Sometimes it makes you feel better just to make a list. Like whenever I am in a really hard situation, I start making a list of things I'm going to do when the situation's over, right? So a really stressful period, I'll just say, these are the things I'm going to do, or these are the, vacations I want to take. And sometimes it never happens, but it just makes me feel better for a minute to just make a list of stuff that I'm going to do when things are different from whatever's happening right now, or when I get to this next phase, I'm going to do this or what have you. Planning, conversing with other people, whatever it is, lunches, play dates, and, don't get crazy with the play date kind of thing. You can order in food, pick it up, go through the drive-through, meet in a park, whatever. Don't, get to the point where you feel like you've got to do all the stuff in order to have a play date with somebody else. So all kinds of things that can work. And then the last one you can see there is stop comparing, because this is Instagram life, right? So you can see Beyonce there, and she had the pregnancy pose, and think about how many people do you think it took, right? To just put the setting and the background and to choose her outfit and her makeup and her hair and, you know, all of those things, not to mention the fact that it could possibly be airbrushed. You know, the woman in the middle who's like, oh, I had this baby and now look at I've got my 6-pack abs or whatever back, right? Or my cute little baby bump, or look at my kids all dressed up, or all of us are matchy or whatever the deal is. You know, just stop comparing yourself to other people, because it's just not going to help. And by the way, if you're one of those perfect moms and there's an area of your life where you're perfect and you do want to share that, that's fine. But just understand that just like you're curating your moments that you post online, other people are curating theirs too. And there's all of these images of perfection that we see. I was looking at something the other day that was like stages of womanhood. And even in that stages of womanhood where they included pregnancy and having young children and what have you, you know, they had the last stage where the woman was like actually hunched over, and they had the middle stage where the woman was carrying a briefcase. And I'm like, that's fine, but that's not everybody's journey, right? You can, everybody's journey is a little bit different. So there's these subtle little messages that can kind of creep in there that just aren't helpful. Because sometimes real life looks a little bit more like this, right? And that baby's actually doing a good job because the food's going in the mom's mouth instead of directly into the hair. So I thought that was helpful. But like you can see, her background is not Pinterest perfect. The one on the top left is actually from Dove, which I really appreciate that they actually had a campaign, Real Life, Real Beauty, right? And trying to show what some of that looks like. But you know, my kids used to love when I get the clothes out of the dryer and I would take the basket and dump it on top of them. And sometimes I would clean that up right away, and sometimes I wouldn't. I just let them roll around in it. And it was clean laundry on the floor. That's crazy, right? But it was something that they enjoyed, and they called it college because we were watching Blue's Clues at the time, for those of you who remember Blue's Clues, and Joe was going off to college. And so for some reason, in their tiny little minds, this whole situation was what it would be like to go to college. So I'll have to ask them. They used to say it all the time, Mom, let's play college. So, you know, these are the kinds of memories that will last much longer than whatever you posted recently on Facebook or Instagram. So my next exercise for you is to think about, what is one thing you need to give yourself permission for? What is one thing? And it could be something that you need to take on. So it could be more me time or getting more help. It could be something that you need to let go of, like a mindset of perfection or comparison. So I'm going to give you just a few minutes here to just kind of think about, what is one thing I need to give myself permission for? And so you can see mine, it's stop trying to do it all myself. I actually had a conversation with my mom, and she was coming to visit, and I'm like, yeah, I'm trying to get everything all cleaned up. And she's like, sweetheart, when I come, I will help you clean up. Like, you don't have to clean up before I get here. And I'm like, but Mom, our house was always clean growing up. And she's like, yeah, I had one of you. And for some reason, you were a pretty tidy person back then. Haha. But she's like, so I just didn't have to do a whole lot, but your life is very different. And so like, I give you permission to just like, let it go, and I will come help you. And I'm like, huh, I never would have guessed. I would have thought for sure she needed my house to be completely clean, right? So I'm gonna stop talking for a minute and let you guys think about what that is. And feel free to type it in the chat, or if somebody wants to talk about it, you can do that too. I love the love for the Blue's Clues. Oh, relax about potty training. Oh my goodness. Yes, my son took forever to potty train. And then I decided to give him M&Ms, and then I got all the flack about, you know, don't give him candy because they're going to be fat for the rest of their life and whatever. And I'm like, if I can get this person to go into the potty, I will do anything. But yeah, and he had accidents for so long. And that was something, until I started talking to other mothers, I just thought I was a failure and I was bad at potty training. Even though I had already potty trained my daughter, I still thought I was a failure. Like, we do this crazy stuff to ourselves as mothers. Crazy. Breastfeeding. I'm like, how can I not breastfeed? Like, my body's just supposed to do this automatically. How could I possibly need a lactation consultant? But it was the best thing that ever happened. I went to a whole breastfeeding support group with amazing women like yourself, and it was life-changing. So, all right. Ooh, lots of stuff. Yes, the sleep schedule. I know that was one of mine too. Stop stressing about organizing. Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. If you didn't think of something, I challenge you to think of something, because everybody has something that they either can take on or let go of, because society, we put all this stuff, and unfortunately a lot of it is moms on other moms. So you might need to let go some of your judgment of something that maybe you have, right? Like I heard somebody earlier talk about sign language, and sign language is amazing, but maybe you're not that mom who has that natural talent to teach your child sign language. And so, that can be great. And maybe you can help that mom, right? So there's all kinds of stuff that we can do. All right, the next one is lean on your village. So you have to ask yourself, who is your village? And I don't just mean this group on the online, which that's fantastic. This is certainly a part of your village, but think about your entire village. However, don't just start thinking about your child's needs. We'll get to that in a minute, but start with your needs. Who do you need around you? Who's that friend that you have that you can call when you're about to tear your hair out? Or what is it that you need from, if there's someone else who's helping you caregive who lives inside your home, the people who might be outside of your home. And I remember my first child, I was very fortunate. I was able to take some significant time off of work, and then my husband took some time off, and then my mother took some time off. But with my second child, he was in daycare after 6 weeks, right? And so I was doing the little daycare tour things, and there was one that got really great ratings, but I walked in and I just got a weird feeling about it. And I'm like, I don't like it, right? And so you have to start thinking about, what is it that really works for you and your child? I thought about in-home care, and I realized I'm not the person who is going to really do well with someone who has in-home care, because I personally, just my personality, it would be hard for me to tell someone else what to do in their own house. So I wanted an institution that I could say, you know what, I am paying you, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about how this needs to go. Or I have the option to very easily walk away and not feel bad that I'm not paying somebody anymore, which is how I would feel if it were a babysitter. But that's just me. Other people love having in-home type of care. So really figure out what's a good need. What are your needs? What are your child's needs? What's really going to work best for you? The other thing is, are they aligned in all three parts of the mind? So going back to this strengths-based concept, and some people, are you in agreement on certain things? Sometimes you do need that contrast to you, right? To kind of fill in for some of those strengths that maybe aren't quite your forte. But just remember, one of the reasons that it takes a village is because each village member has different strengths, right? So you really want to think about, is your village aligned to the strengths and the needs to your child? What do your kids need other kids to socialize with? Do you have a co-parent who maybe doesn't share the same financial values, or methods of discipline is another big one. All of those kinds of things. If you do need someone who has routines, is your babysitter willing to follow the routines, or have systems that make you feel comfortable? All of those kinds of things are really important. Aunts, uncles, whoever you have as a part of your village, lean on them for sure, but also have the conversation so that you know what to expect. And again, all three parts of the mind. What skills and experiences do you need the person to have? What preferences and values? And then how do they solve problems and make decisions? Because, for example, if your child gets sick, are they going to Google it, or are they going to call the doctor, right? Or call you? So you need to just kind of make sure that you're aligned on some of these things so that they don't go awry. All right, so one last thing. I just wanted to plant some seeds for the future. I know some of you have very, very young kids. Your, kids are still in diapers, or can't walk, or can't talk yet. But there's also folks who have older kids and what have you. But I just wanted to plant some seeds for the future. And the seed I wanted to plant here was just, one size doesn't fit all. I've kind of talked about this a little bit already, but we're all different. That difference is diversity, which is a strength in itself, right? But parents and kids. And so even though I'm a big, big, big proponent of understanding your own strengths, please do also over time start to learn the strengths of your child, because no two kids are alike, as I mentioned before. Even twins, we actually did some fun stuff with Colby where we did twin studies. studies, and we went to Twinsville, I think it's Ohio, and actually did some twin studies with strengths. And even though these are instinctive, innate strengths, you would think that they would be tied to some genetic component, but they're not. Our founder's husband actually is a twin, and they have different Colby results and have different personalities and all of that kind of stuff. So the goal as parents also is to not impose your own strengths on your kids, but to use your strengths to make your life a bit better as well as theirs. So that's really one of the last thoughts I wanted to leave you with, but I just wanted to thank you for, making time and space for me today, and let you know that you're a part of a movement. This is a time that we take every single year in March. We call it Colby Strengths Week, to really, donate our time and talents and some of our products from our company, and everybody in our whole company gets a chance to choose some projects to do it. And so I'm just so glad that you were a part of mine. And if you want a little inspiration, some positive inspiration on on social media, you can follow our hashtag at Colby Strengths Week, or if you've taken the assessment and you want to share your strengths or find others who have similar strengths, you can do some of that as well. But the last thing I wanted to say is be yourself, because everyone else is already taken. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much, Stephanie. That's so beautiful. Yeah, no kidding. Everyone else is already taken, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for speaking for us today and for sharing your wisdom and knowledge, and also for letting us, take this strengths quiz, because I think that's really a huge thing. I know when I took it now listening to you explain this, I'm like, oh yeah, I am not a structure person. I need to let go of that. It's like never going to work for me. And that's so freeing. I love that. I love that, that gives you permission to be like, okay, well, this is how I naturally am going to perform. So maybe I just need to lean into that instead of trying so hard to come up with new systems of organization. Yeah, so thank you so much for being here. And those of you who are joining us on Facebook, if you'd like to come and chat with us offline, we are going to be in our Zoom group for another 15 minutes or so, chatting about these strengths and asking Stephanie some questions and maybe talking amongst ourselves. So if you'd like to join us, feel free. But we're going to pop off of Facebook Live now. You want to